Lanternlight Guild Hall was quiet that morning. Soft light rested along the wooden beams above. It barely moved. It held its place, warm and steady. The fire in the hearth had burned low. A small bed of coals remained. Their glow was faint, but enough to keep the room gently warm. A trace of heated wood drifted through the air. Somewhere beyond the walls, the river moved slowly. No one hurried. The hall had settled into the kind of silence that came before the day fully began. 4 familiar figures stood near the hearth. Brenna's stone hand rested one hand on the top of her axe. The weapon leaned beside her, steady and within reach. It did not draw attention. It simply belonged there. Her fur cloak hung loose around her shoulders. It carried a hint of the cool air from outside. She left it as it was. She stood at ease. Edrin Vale adjusted the strap of his satchel. The motion was slow and practiced. The leather gave a soft shift as it settled into place. A faint scent of dried herbs followed him. Clean, simple. He looked across the room without searching, only noticing. Kaela Thorne stood near one of the tall windows. The glass was lightly clouded. Beyond it, the early light stretched across the road outside. It came in slowly, without pressure. Her hood rested low over her brow. She remained still. Her gaze stayed on the road. Thomas Greywick stood closest to the hearth. A small lantern rested on the table beside him. Its flame was steady. It gave off a quiet glow that matched the coals nearby. He left it untouched. The wooden floor gave a soft creak, not from movement, the building itself settling into the morning. Somewhere deeper in the hall, a door closed. The sound faded quickly. The guild hall had seen many mornings like this. Quiet ones, slow ones. On the far wall, a board held a few simple requests. Most had already been taken. A few remained, spaced apart in careful lines. The ink had dried cleanly. Nothing about them pressed for attention. One parchment stood out, untouched. Its edges were still flat. No mark had been made beside it. It had been left where it was, waiting. Brenna's gaze moved toward it first. The shift was small. Her posture stayed the same. Her hand remained on the axe. She simply looked. Edrin noticed next. His eyes followed in the same direction, settling without hurry. Kaela turned slightly from the window, just enough to bring the board into view. Thomas did not move, but his attention aligned with the others. The four of them stood in the same quiet awareness. The untouched request. The fire in the hearth shifted softly. An ember settled lower into the ash. Brenna stepped forward. Her boots made little sound against the wood. Each step was even and unhurried. She crossed the room and stopped at the board. The parchment remained still. She reached out and brushed a hand along its edge, not to take it yet, only to feel its place. The paper held firm. Edrin followed after a moment, stopping a short distance behind her. Kaela left the window and joined them without pause. The light behind her remained unchanged. Thomas waited by the hearth for a breath longer, then stepped forward as well. The lantern stayed where it was. The four of them gathered near the board. No one spoke at first. The parchment held a simple line of writing. The script was even, easy to read. A request for passage, a journey along the river. No urgency, no warning, only distance and direction. Brenna read it once, then again. Her hand rested at her side. "She's been there a while," Edrin said softly. His voice settled into the quiet. Brenna gave a small nod. "Looks like it." Kaela's gaze moved across the board. "No other marks," she said. Thomas studied the parchment for a moment longer. "It's simple enough." No one disagreed. The room remained still around them. The coals shifted again, giving off a soft, steady warmth. A thin line of light moved across the floor as the sun rose higher outside. Brenna reached out once more. This time, she took the parchment from the board. It came free, without resistance. She held it briefly, then lowered her hand. "That'll do," she said. Edrin gave a small nod. Kaela turned slightly toward the door. Thomas remained still, his gaze steady. Nothing more needed to be said. The choice had been made. Quietly, behind them, the board remained with a few requests still in place. The space where the parchment had been was now empty. The hall stayed as it was. Warm, still, and the day continued. The path to the river began just beyond the guild hall. It curved gently between low stone walls and patches of soft grass. The ground was even, worn smooth by years of quiet travel. Brenna stepped onto the path first. Her pace was steady, not fast, not slow. The others followed without a word. Edrin adjusted his satchel once as he walked. The leather settled into place, and the soft scent of herbs drifted briefly in the air before fading again. Kaela moved with light steps behind them. Her gaze shifted from the path to the edges of the road, taking in small details without pause. Thomas walked last. His hands rested loosely at his sides. The morning light touched the edge of his sleeve as he moved. The air outside was cooler than inside the hall. It carried a faint trace of damp earth. The path sloped slightly downward. Not enough to notice at first, only enough that each step felt easier than the last. On either side, the land stretched open in quiet tones. Low grass moved gently in the breeze. Small stones rested where they had long been undisturbed. No carts passed, no voices carried. Only the soft sound of their steps against the ground. Ahead, the light widened. The river did not appear all at once. It revealed itself slowly, first as a change in the air, then as a soft, steady sound. Water moving at its own pace. Brenna did not turn back. She continued forward, her steps unchanged. Edrin lifted his gaze slightly. "The river's close," he said. His voice remained soft. Brenna gave a small nod. Kaela's attention shifted ahead. "Path widens," she said. It did. The stone walls gave way to open ground. The path became broader, less defined. Grass grew closer to the center. Thomas looked ahead, his gaze steady. "It follows the bend," he said. No one needed to respond. The sound of the water grew clearer. A slow, repeating motion. Not loud, not sharp, just steady. The breeze carried it toward them. They continued along the path. Their pace remained the same, unhurried. The ground beneath their feet changed slightly, softer now. A mix of packed earth and fine gravel. It gave a quieter sound with each step. The light opened further as they moved. The sky stretched wider above the river's edge. When the river came fully into view, it did not draw attention. It simply was there. wide, slow. Its surface moved in long, gentle lines. The current did not rush. It carried itself forward with quiet purpose. The far bank rested in soft distance. Low trees lined the edge, their shapes still in the morning light. Closer to the path, the ground leveled out. A worn trail led alongside the water. Brenna stepped onto it without pause. The others followed. The sound of the river settled into a steady rhythm beside them. Water moving, light shifting. A quiet loop. Edrin glanced toward the surface. Clean flow, he said. Brenna gave a small nod. Kaela looked along the bank. No recent tracks, she said. Thomas let his gaze rest on the water for a moment. It's steady, he said. They continued walking. The river remained beside them. Its motion did not change. It moved as it had before, and would continue after. The breeze shifted slightly. It carried the scent of water and stone. Cool, faint. The path curved again, following the shape of the river. Ahead, the outline of the dock began to form, still distant, simple, low against the water. Brenna kept her pace. The others stayed with her. No one spoke again. The sound of their steps softened further as they walked. The river continued beside them, slow, even, unbroken, and the path carried them forward. The dock came into view slowly. At first, it was only a darker shape along the edge of the river. Then the details settled into place. Wooden posts, a low platform, a few tied ropes resting without tension. Brenna continued forward at the same steady pace. The others followed. The ground beneath their feet shifted again as they approached. The path gave way to packed earth, mixed with worn planks near the water's edge. The sound changed. Footsteps softened. The river remained beside them, moving in its quiet, steady rhythm. As they drew closer, the barge became clear. It sat low in the water, wide, built from thick, worn wood that had darkened over time. The surface held marks of use, but nothing was broken. Nothing stood out as new. It simply looked used and ready. Two long poles rested along its side. Their ends touched the water lightly, drifting with the motion of the river. The barge did not move much. Only a slow shift, water against wood. A soft, repeating sound. Near the front of the dock, 2 figures stood. The rivermen. They did not call out. They did not signal. One held a rope loosely in his hand. The other rested a hand on one of the poles. Both stood at ease, watching, waiting. Brenna stepped onto the dock. The wood gave a soft creak beneath her weight. It was not sharp. It settled quickly. She moved forward without pause. Edrin followed, his steps careful but unhurried. The scent of herbs lingered briefly again as he moved into the open air near the water. Kaela stepped onto the dock next. Her movement was light, barely shifting the boards beneath her. Thomas came last. His steps were even, measured. The dock held them without strain. The river moved beneath it. A slow, constant presence. Brenna stopped a short distance from the rivermen. They gave small nods in return. No greeting was spoken. No need for one. One of the rivermen shifted the rope slightly, adjusting its position along the post. The fibers made a faint, dry sound as they moved. The other lifted the pole just enough to set it more firmly against the barge. The end dipped into the water, then rested. The barge responded with a small movement, a gentle pull, then stillness again. Brenna held the parchment at her side. She did not raise it. The rivermen's attention settled on it briefly, then returned to the group. Edrin looked along the length of the barge. Solid build, he said quietly. The riverman nearest him gave a small nod. It holds, he said. His voice was low, even. Kaela's gaze moved along the waterline. No drift, she said. The second riverman glanced toward the current. Not today, he replied. Thomas looked across the surface of the river. His eyes followed the slow movement of the water as it passed along the hull. It will carry us, he said. No one added to it. The breeze shifted lightly across the dock. It carried the scent of water and aged wood, cool, faint. The barge rested close to the edge of the dock. A narrow plank bridged the space between. It had been placed with care. It did not move. Brenna stepped closer. She paused at the edge. Her gaze moved across the surface of the barge, then to the poles, then to the water beyond. Everything remained steady. She stepped onto the plank. It gave slightly under her weight, then held firm. Her steps remained even, measured. She crossed onto the barge. The wood beneath her feet felt solid, worn smooth from use. She moved a few steps in, then stopped. Edrin followed next. He stepped onto the plank with the same calm pace. The slight shift of wood returned, then settled again. He crossed onto the barge and moved to stand a short distance from Brenna. Kaela came after. Her steps were light, controlled. The plank barely moved beneath her. She crossed and took her place without sound. Thomas stepped onto the plank last. He moved with the same steady rhythm as before. The plank shifted once more, then stilled as he stepped onto the barge. The four of them stood together. The barge adjusted to their weight. A slow dip, then balance. The river moved beneath them. The sound changed slightly. Water against a larger surface, a deeper tone. One of the rivermen stepped onto the barge from the front. The other followed from the side. Their movements were practiced, quiet. Each took a pole. They set the ends into the water, not with force, only enough to find the riverbed below. The poles angled slightly, held. The barge waited, still. The rope at the dock remained tied, loose. The riverman nearest it stepped back onto the dock. He untied the rope with a few simple motions. The fibers loosened. The tension eased. He gathered the rope into a coil and set it aside. Then he stepped back onto the barge. The space between dock and vessel remained narrow. The plank stayed in place. The barge drifted only slightly. The river continued its slow movement. The rivermen set their footing, one at the front, one near the rear. They did not speak. The poles rested in the water, ready. The breeze moved again, light across the surface. Small ripples formed and passed. The sound of water remained steady. Brenna looked ahead along the river. Edrin adjusted his satchel once more. Kaela stood near the edge, her gaze following the line of the bank. Thomas rested his attention on the water for a moment, then lifted it towards the distance. The barge remained in place, balanced between stillness and motion. The rivermen shifted their grip. The poles pressed gently against the riverbed. A pause. Then the first push. The movement was slow, measured. The pole sank slightly, then held. The barge responded. A small shift forward. Water moved along the sides. A soft change in sound. The second pole followed. Set, pressed, lifted. Drips of water fell back into the river. A quiet pattern began. Pole set, water press, lift, drip. The barge moved away from the dock, slowly, without strain. The plank remained for a moment longer, then slipped free as the distance widened. It rested back against the dock. The barge continued forward. The dock remained behind them. The river opened ahead, wide, steady. The poles moved again. Set, press, lift, drip. The rhythm held. The sound of water deepened around them. Wood creaked softly under the shifting weight. Nothing rushed. Nothing changed suddenly. The barge entered the current, and the journey began. The barge rested just off the dock. It no longer touched the wood behind them. A narrow stretch of water sat between the two. It shifted gently, carrying small reflections that moved and returned. The river moved beneath them in long, even lines. Light settled on the surface, then drifted away, then settled again. Nothing in the motion felt rushed. The rivermen stood in place, one at the front, one at the rear. Their poles remained set in the water, angled and steady. They were not pushing yet, only holding. The barge stayed balanced, a slow rise, a soft settle. Brenna stood near the center. Her stance was even. Her weight rested cleanly beneath her feet. She did not need to adjust. She looked ahead along the river. Edrin stood a short distance to her left. He shifted his satchel once, letting the strap fall into a comfortable place. The scent of herbs lifted briefly, then faded into the open air. Kaela stood closer to the edge. Her gaze followed the line of the bank as it curved away from the dock. She did not track quickly. Her attention moved in the same slow rhythm as the water. Thomas remained still. His posture did not change. His attention rested on the surface of the river, where light and motion blended into a quiet pattern. No one spoke. The dock behind them remained unchanged. The rope had been set aside. The plank rested where it had been before. The posts stood still. Only the distance had shifted. The riverman at the front adjusted his grip. His hands moved a small amount along the pole. The wood made a faint, dry sound as it shifted. He set the pole deeper into the riverbed. Not with force, only enough to find a steady hold. The second riverman mirrored the motion. Both poles angled slightly, held. There was a brief pause. The river moved around them. Then the first push. The pole pressed into the riverbed. The barge responded with a slow forward shift. Water moved along the sides. The sound changed, just enough to notice. The pole lifted. Drops fell back into the river. Small circles formed and spread, then faded. The second pole followed. Set, press. Lift, drip. The pattern began again. The barge moved a little further from the dock. The distance widened. The dock became less defined, still present, but softer. Brenna remained steady. Her gaze stayed forward. Edrin looked briefly toward the water. "Easy current," he said. His voice stayed low. The riverman at the rear gave a small nod. "It carries well." Kaela's gaze moved along the bank. "Wide enough," she said. Thomas followed the movement of the water. "It will keep us," he said. The poles moved again. Set, press, lift, drip. Each motion matched the last. Nothing changed. Nothing needed to. The barge entered the main current. The movement smoothed. The push from the poles became lighter. The river began to carry more of the weight. The sound deepened slightly. Water against wood. A steady, low tone. The breeze passed across the surface. Cool, even. It carried the scent of water and worn timber. The bank began to move past them, slowly. Grass near the edge bent in soft motion. Small stones rested at the waterline. They did not shift. The far side of the river remained distant. Trees stood in quiet shapes. Their reflections stretched and softened in the current. Brenna shifted her footing once. A small adjustment, then still again. Edrin rested his hands along the strap of his satchel. Kaela's attention followed the curve of the shoreline. Thomas let his gaze rest on the moving surface. The poles continued. Set, press, lift, drip. Water fell in steady drops. Each one formed a circle. Each circle widened, then disappeared. Again. Set, press, lift, drip. The barge moved forward without strain. The dock was now behind the bend, no longer visible. Only the river remained, wide, steady. The path they had taken was gone from view. The journey held only what was ahead. The rivermen adjusted their footing slightly. Their movements remained calm, practiced. The poles dipped again. Set, press, lift, drip. The rhythm stayed even. The sound of wood gave a soft creak beneath the shift, then settled again. The light shifted across the surface. Not quickly, only enough to mark time. The breeze remained steady. The scent of water and wood stayed constant. Brenna stood at ease. Edrin remained near her. Kaela stayed close to the edge. Thomas stood where he had been. No one needed to move. No one needed to speak. The river carried them. The poles guided them. Set, press, lift, drip. The motion repeated. The sound repeated. The pace held. And the journey settled fully into its rhythm. The barge moved steadily along the river. The motion had settled. No longer starting. No longer adjusting. Only continuing. The poles moved in a quiet pattern. Set, press, lift, drip. Water fell in soft drops. Each drop touched the surface and spread outward, then faded. The river carried the rest. Brenna stood near the center of the barge. Her stance remained even, her balance did not shift. The movement beneath her had become familiar. Edrin stood a short distance away. His hands rested lightly against the strap of his satchel. He did not adjust it again. There was no need. Kaela remained near the edge. Her gaze followed the passing bank, not tracking, not searching, only observing. Thomas stood with a calm posture. His attention moved between the water and the distance ahead. Nothing held him for long. Everything passed at the same pace. The river widened slightly. Not all at once, only enough that the far bank seemed a little further away. The water remained smooth. Long lines moved across the surface. They did not break. They did not rush. The breeze passed over the river. Cool, even. It carried the faint scent of water and stone. The barge moved with the current, not ahead of it, not against it, only with it. The pulls continued. Set, press, lift, drip. The sound of wood shifted softly beneath their feet. A low creak, then stillness. The rivermen did not change their pace. Each movement matched the last. Each motion placed with care. The rhythm held. The bank moved past in slow detail. Patches of grass, low stones, a fallen branch near the water's edge. Nothing called for attention. Everything remained part of the same quiet flow. Edrin looked briefly toward the surface. Clear water, he said. His voice stayed low. Brenna gave a small nod. Kaela's gaze shifted slightly. Nothing recent, she said. Thomas watched the light move across the water. It will stay this way, he said. The pulls moved again. Set, press, lift, drip. The sound repeated. The motion repeated. The pace remained unchanged. Time passed without measure. The river carried it quietly. The light rose higher in the sky. It spread across the surface in a wider path. Reflections shifted, then settled. The breeze softened for a moment, then returned. Always the same, always steady. Brenna shifted her footing once, a small adjustment, then still again. Edrin rested his hands loosely. Kaela followed the curve of the bank. Thomas let his gaze rest on the water again. The barge continued forward. The river did most of the work now. The poles guided, set, press, lift, drip. Water fell. Circles formed. Circles faded. The sound of the river deepened slightly. Not louder, only fuller. The bank curved gently to the left. The barge followed. No change in pace, no shift in balance, only a gradual turn. The far trees moved in slow alignment with the curve. Their shapes remained soft. Their reflection stretched and thinned along the surface. The breeze carried a new trace of scent. Damp earth, faint. It passed as quickly as it came. The rhythm continued. Set, press, lift, drip. Brenna looked ahead. Nothing interrupted the path. Only water. Only distance. Edrin lowered his gaze. The surface moved in long lines beneath him. Kaela remained still. Her attention stayed with the bank. Thomas watched the motion of light again. The poles continued their work. Each set placed cleanly. Each press steady. Each lift controlled. Each drip returning to the river. The sound became familiar, expected, part of the space around them. The barge moved further into open water. The banks felt more distant now, not gone, but softened. The center of the river held them. The current carried them evenly. No pull, no resistance, only forward motion. The sky above remained clear. The light settled without change. The breeze remained consistent. Nothing shifted suddenly. Nothing needed to. Edrin spoke once more. Good pace. The riverman at the front gave a small nod. It holds. Kaela did not speak again. Brenna remained steady. Thomas gave a slight glance ahead. It will carry us through the bend. The poles moved. Set, press, lift, drip. The rhythm didn't break. The sound of water against the hull remained low. The wood beneath them stayed firm. A soft creak. then still. The river continued. The barge continued. The pattern held. Time passed, not counted, only felt. The light shifted slightly. The breeze adjusted, then returned. The bank curved again, a long, gradual turn. The barge followed without effort. The rivermen adjusted their stance. A small shift of feet, nothing more. The poles dipped again. Set, press, lift, drip. Water fell. Circles formed, then disappeared. Brenna stood as she had before. Edrin remained beside her. Kaela near the edge. Thomas watching the water. Nothing changed. The river moved. The barge moved. The rhythm remained. And the journey settled deeper into its quiet flow. The barge continued along the river. The motion remained steady. No change in pace. No change in direction. Only a quiet continuation. The poles moved in the same pattern. Set, press, lift, drip. Water fell in soft drops. Each drop formed a small circle. Each circle widened, then faded. The river carried the rest. Brenna stood near the center. Her stance remained even. The movement beneath her had settled into something familiar. Edrin stood nearby. His satchel rested in place. He did not adjust it. Kaela remained near the edge. Her gaze followed the passing bank. Thomas stood with the same calm posture. His attention moved slowly between the water and the distance ahead. The light had risen higher. It spread evenly across the surface. Reflections moved in long, quiet lines. The brightness was soft, not sharp, not harsh. The breeze remained gentle. It carried the scent of water and wood. Cool, faint. The river widened again. Gradually, the far bank softened further into the distance. Trees stood in quiet shapes. Their reflections stretched and shifted along the surface. The barge remained centered in the current. The motion required little effort now. The poles guided. Set, press, lift, drip. The sound remained steady. Water against wood, a low, even tone. The bank passed in slow detail. Small patches of grass, low stones, a fallen branch near the edge, a narrow stretch of sand. Each part moved by without pause, without change. Edrin looked toward the bank. "Dry ground there," he said. His voice remained low. Brenna gave a small nod. Kaela's gaze shifted slightly. "Nothing moving," she said. Thomas watched the water. "It holds steady," he said. The poles moved again. Set, press, lift, drip. The rhythm continued. Time passed without measure. The light warmed slightly. Not enough to notice at first. Only enough to settle across the surface. The breeze softened, then returned. Always the same. Always even. Brenna shifted her weight once, a small adjustment, then still again. Edrin rested his hands lightly. Kaela followed the line of the bank. Thomas watched the surface as it moved. The barge continued forward. The river carried it. The poles guided it. Set, press, lift, drip. Water fell. Circles formed. Circles faded. The bank curved gently. The barge followed without effort. The far trees aligned with the turn. Their reflections stretched, then settled again. The scent of damp earth passed briefly, then faded. The rhythm did not change. Set, press, lift, drip. The light reached its highest point. It rested evenly across the river. No shadows stretched. No shapes shifted quickly. Everything remained balanced. The breeze slowed, then steadied. The surface of the water became smoother. Long lines formed, unbroken. The sound softened slightly, not quieter, only more even. Brenna looked ahead. Nothing interrupted the path, only open water. Edrin lowered his gaze. The surface moved beneath him in quiet patterns. Kaela remained still, her attention steady. Thomas watched the reflection of light. The poles continued. Set, press, lift, drip. Each motion matched the last, each sound repeated. Nothing changed, nothing needed to. The barge moved deeper into the center of the river. The banks felt distant now, soft outlines, unchanging. The current held them, even, consistent. Edrin spoke once more. Warm now. The riverman at the front gave a small nod. It will hold. Kaela did not respond. Brenna remained steady. Thomas glanced ahead. Still clear. The poles moved. Set, press, lift, drip. Water fell. Circles formed, then disappeared. The sound of the river remained low. The wood beneath them gave a soft creak, then settled again. The light held steady. The breeze remained even. The scent of water and wood stayed constant. The barge moved forward, unbroken. The river moved with it. The rhythm remained. Time passed. The light shifted only slightly. The breeze remained soft. The bank curved again. A long, gradual turn. The barge followed. No effort needed. The rivermen adjusted their footing. A small shift, nothing more. The poles dipped again. Set, press, lift, drip. Water fell. Circles spread, then faded. Brenna stood as before, Edrin beside her, Kaela near the edge, Thomas watching the water. The pattern held, the motion held, the calm held. The river carried them, and the day settled into its quiet middle. The barge continued along the river. The motion remained steady. The rhythm did not change. Set, press, lift, drip. Water fell in quiet drops. Each drop formed a circle. Each circle widened, then faded. The river carried the rest. The light began to soften. It did not shift all at once. Only a gradual change. The brightness eased. The edges of the reflections grew less sharp. The surface of the water held a warmer tone. Brenna stood near the center. Her stance remained steady. The movement beneath her required no adjustment. Edrin stood nearby, His satchel rested where it had been. He did not move it. Kaela remained near the edge. Her gaze followed the bank. Thomas stood in the same place. His attention rested on the surface of the river. The breeze changed slightly. It carried less coolness, more still air between each movement. The scent of water and wood remained, soft, familiar. The poles continued. Set, press, lift, drip. The sound stayed even. Water against wood. A low, steady tone. The bank moved past in slow detail. Grass near the edge. Small stones at the waterline. A low stretch of earth rising slightly above the river. Nothing drew attention. Everything passed in the same quiet way. Edrin looked toward the bank. "Lights lowering," he said. His voice stayed soft. Brenna gave a small nod. Kaela's gaze shifted slightly. "Still clear," she said. Thomas followed the change in light. "It will fade evenly." The poles moved again. Set, press, lift, drip. The rhythm held. The river carried them forward. The far bank remained distant. Trees stood in quiet shapes. Their reflections stretched longer now. The light rested lower across the surface. The sky held a softer tone. The barge moved through it all without change. The motion stayed even. The current held steady. The breeze slowed again, then returned, always the same, always measured. Brenna shifted her footing once, a small adjustment, then still again. Edrin rested his hands lightly. Kaela followed the curve of the bank. Thomas watched the surface as it changed. The poles continued. Set, press, lift, drip. Water fell. Circles formed. Circles faded. The bank began to change. Subtle at first. A slightly higher rise. A thicker patch of grass. A small cluster of stones set closer together. The river curved gently. The barge followed. No change in pace. No effort needed. The rivermen adjusted their footing slightly. A small shift, then still again. The poles dipped once more. Set, press, lift, drip. The sound remained constant. The light lowered further. Shadows stretched along the surface, not sharp, only longer. The warmth in the light deepened. The reflections softened. The breeze moved across the river again, cool returning. The scent of damp earth passed briefly, then settled. Brenna looked ahead. A shape began to form along the bank. Low, simple, not distant. The outline became clearer as they moved. A place to stop. Nothing marked it. No structure. Only a section of bank where the ground rose slightly above the water. Edrin followed her gaze. "Good ground," he said. The riverman at the front gave a small nod. "It will hold." Kaela watched the edge. "Easy approach," she said. Thomas looked along the waterline. No obstruction. The poles moved again. Set, press, lift, drip. The barge adjusted its path slightly. A gentle angle toward the bank. The motion remained slow, controlled. The current eased near the edge. The water grew quieter. Less pull, more stillness. The sound softened. The poles pressed with slightly more care. Set, press, lift, drip. Each movement smaller now, more precise. The barge drifted closer. The bank rose beside them. Grass moved lightly in the breeze. Small stones rested near the edge. The water touched them and pulled away. The riverman at the front stepped forward slightly. He shifted his grip on the pole. Set, press, hold. The barge slowed. The motion reduced. A quiet settling. The second riverman mirrored the motion. Set, press, hold. The barge aligned with the bank, parallel, steady. The movement eased further, almost still. The sound of water softened to a low, even tone. Brenna remained steady. Edrin watched the edge. Kaela observed the ground. Thomas let his gaze rest on the water. The riverman at the front reached for a rope. It rested coiled near his feet. He lifted it with a quiet motion. The fibers shifted softly. He stepped onto the bank. The ground held firm. He moved a short distance and secured the rope around a low post set into the earth. No rush, no strain. The rope settled into place. The tension held. The second riverman adjusted the barge with a final press of the pole. Set, press, hold, then lifted it free. The barge came to rest. A gentle contact with the bank. No jolt, no sound beyond a soft shift of water. The movement ended. The river continued, but the barge no longer moved with it. It rested, balanced, still. The rope held steady. The water moved past. The light continued to lower. Brenna looked along the bank. Edrin adjusted his stance slightly. Kaela remained near the edge. Thomas stood as before. No one spoke. The air settled. The breeze softened. The scent of water and earth remained. The river flowed beside them, steady, unchanged. The barge rested against the bank, secure, quiet, and the day eased toward evening. The barge rested against the bank. The rope held it in place. The river continued beside it, slow, even, unbroken. The light had lowered. What remained was soft, faint lines across the water, gentle shapes along the bank. Nothing sharp, nothing bright. The air had cooled, not cold, only quieter. The breeze moved in slower intervals, then paused, then returned. The scent of water and damp earth remained. Steady, familiar. A lantern rested near the center of the barge. Its light was warm, faint. It did not reach far, only enough to settle across the nearby wood. The flame held steady. It barely shifted. The air did not ask it to. Brenna stood near the center. Her stance remained even. The motion beneath her had stilled. Only a faint touch of water along the hull. Edrin stood nearby. His satchel rested where it had been. He did not adjust it. His posture remained loose, unforced. Kaela stood near the edge. Her gaze followed the water. Not far, only near. Thomas stood in place, His attention rested on the surface. The river had changed. Less light, more depth. Reflections had softened into darker tones. The rivermen moved quietly. One checked the rope, a small pull, then still. The other placed his pole along the side. Wood touched wood, a soft contact, then quiet again. No one spoke. The river carried the sound. Water against the bank, water against the hull. A low, steady pattern. The bank remained beside them. Grass moved when the breeze returned, then settled again. Small stones rested at the edge. The water reached them, then pulled away. Reached, then pulled away. The pattern continued. Time passed, not counted, only felt. The light lowered further. The sky deepened. The river reflected less. More shadow, more still tone. The lantern held steady. Its glow rested in place. The barge remained still. The rope held firm. The river continued. Edrin spoke once. Good rest here. His voice was low. Brenna gave a small nod. It holds. Kaela remained still. Thomas looked along the water. Quiet enough. The breeze passed again. Cool, even. It moved across the surface. Small ripples formed, then settled. The sound remained constant. The wood beneath them gave a faint creak, then stilled. The lantern shifted slightly, then steadied again. The river continued, unchanged. The bank remained. The barge rested. The air cooled a little more. The scent of water deepened. Damp, clean. The group remained where they were. No need to move. No need to speak. The rhythm of the day had ended. A new one took its place. Water, wind, stillness again. Water, wind, stillness. The pattern continued. The sound softened further, not less, only deeper. The space felt wider, even in the dark. The lantern marked a small center. Everything else moved around it, slowly, evenly. Brenna shifted once, a small adjustment, then still again. Edrin rested his hands. Kaela remained at the edge. Thomas watched the water. The rivermen rested, their work complete. The rope held. The barge held. The river moved. Time passed. The lantern remained. The light stayed low. The breeze slowed, then returned, always the same. The water touched the hull, then moved on, touched, then moved on. The sound repeated. The night deepened. The sky darkened further. The edges of the bank softened. The shapes became less defined. The river held its motion, steady, unchanged. The lantern gave a small shift, then steadied. The flame remained calm. The air stayed even. No sudden movement, no sharp sound, only the quiet pattern. Water, wind, wood. Stillness again. Water, wind, wood. Stillness. The barge rested. The rope held. The river flowed. And the night settled fully into quiet. Nothing changed. Nothing needed to. The stillness remained. The river moved before the light returned. It did not stop in the night. It did not change its pace. It carried on in the same quiet way. The barge rested against the bank. The rope held it in place. The wood gave a faint shift now and then as the water moved along its side, then settled again. The air had changed, cooler than before, damp. A thin layer of mist rested above the surface of the river. It did not rise high, only enough to soften the space between water and air. The lantern had dimmed. Its light was faint now, barely reaching beyond its place. Brenna stood near the center. Her stance had not changed. She remained steady, at ease. Edrin stood nearby. His satchel rested against his side. He did not adjust it. Kaela remained near the edge. Her gaze followed the surface, closer now, more focused on what was near than what was far. Thomas stood in place. His attention rested on the mist, the way it moved, slow, even. The rivermen stirred first. One moved toward the rope. His steps were quiet, measured. He loosened the knot with steady hands. The fibers shifted softly, then released. The rope was gathered and set aside. The barge shifted slightly, not forward, only free. The second riverman stepped into place. He lifted his pole. The wood made a faint sound as it moved. He set it into the water. The tip disappeared beneath the surface, then found hold. The first riverman mirrored the motion. Both poles angled, held. The barge waited, balanced, still. Then the first push. The motion returned, slow, controlled. The barge eased away from the bank. Water moved along the hull. The sound returned, low, steady. The poles lifted. Drops fell back into the river. Soft, even, set, press, lift, drip. The rhythm began again. Brenna shifted her stance once, a small adjustment, then steady again. Edrin rested his hands along the strap of his satchel. Kaela followed the edge of the mist as it passed. Thomas watched the surface as the movement returned. The barge entered the current once more. The motion smoothed. The river carried most of the weight. The poles guided, set, press, lift, drip. The mist moved around them, not pushed away, not broken, only parted gently as they passed, then settled again behind them. The light began to return. Not all at once. A gradual lift. The sky lightened. The surface of the water reflected more. Still soft. Still muted. The bank moved past slowly. Shapes returned. Grass, stone, low earth. Nothing sharp, nothing sudden. Edrin looked toward the surface. Cool this morning, he said. His voice remained low. Brenna gave a small nod. It will warm. Kaela's gaze shifted along the bank, clear ahead. Thomas watched the mist thin. It will lift soon. The poles moved again. Set, press, lift, drip. The rhythm held. The barge moved deeper into the river. The bank softened. The mist thinned slightly. The light spread further. The surface of the water showed longer lines. The breeze returned. Light, even. It carried the scent of water and damp earth. The barge continued forward. The river carried it. The poles guided it. Set, press, lift, drip. Water fell. Circles formed, then faded. Time passed. The mist lifted slowly. Not gone, only thinner. The far bank became clearer. Trees took shape. Their reflections stretched across the surface. Brenna looked ahead. The path remained open, unbroken. Edrin lowered his gaze. The water moved beneath him in steady lines. Kaela followed the edge of the bank. Thomas watched the light as it returned. The poles continued. Set, press, lift, drip. The sound remained even. The wood beneath them gave a soft creak, then stilled again. The light grew stronger, still soft, still calm. The mist continued to lift. The space around them widened. The river opened again. The banks settled into distance. The barge moved with the current. No effort, no strain. The rivermen adjusted their footing slightly. A small shift, then steady again. The poles dipped once more. Set, press, lift, drip. Water fell. Circles spread, then disappeared. Edrin spoke again. Good drift. The riverman at the front gave a small nod. It holds. Kaela remained quiet. Brenna steady. Thomas looked ahead. Clear passage. The poles moved. Set, press, lift, drip. The rhythm did not break. The river carried them forward. The light continued to rise. The mist thinned further. Only faint traces remained along the surface. The bank passed in slow detail. Nothing changed. Nothing needed to. The barge moved. The river moved. The rhythm held. Time passed. The light settled fully into morning. Soft, even. The breeze remained steady. The scent of water remained. Clean, faint. The group held their places. Brenna at center, Edrin nearby, Kaela at the edge, Thomas watching the water, the rivermen steady at their posts. The poles continued. Set, press, lift, drip. The journey moved toward its close, not with urgency, not with change, only continuation. The river remained wide. The path remained clear. The motion remained steady, and the morning carried them forward. The river continued as it had before, slow, even, unbroken. The barge moved with it. The motion had settled into something familiar again. Set, press, lift, drip. Water fell in soft drops. Each drop formed a circle. Each circle widened, then faded. The light had fully returned. Morning rested across the surface. Soft, even. The mist had lifted. Only clear air remained. The banks stood in quiet detail once more. Grass near the edge, low stones, a gradual rise of earth. Nothing sharp, nothing sudden. Brenna stood near the center. Her stance remained steady. The motion beneath her required no thought. Edrin stood nearby. His satchel rested at his side. He did not adjust it. Kaela remained near the edge. Her gaze followed the bank. Thomas stood in place. His attention rested on the path ahead. The river curved gently. The barge followed. No change in pace. No shift in balance. Only continuation. The poles moved again. Set, press, lift, drip. The sound remained steady. Water against wood. A low, even tone. The bank began to change. Not quickly, only small details at first. A clearer line along the edge. A section of ground that held its shape longer. A faint structure in the distance. Low, simple. Brenna's gaze settled forward. The shape became clearer as they moved. A small landing. Wood set into the bank. Nothing large. Nothing marked. Only a place to arrive. Edrin followed her gaze. "End of the line," he said softly. The riverman at the front gave a small nod. "It's there." Kaela's attention shifted. Clear approach. Thomas watched the water near the bank. It will slow. The poles moved again. Set, press, lift, drip. The barge adjusted its path slightly. A gentle angle toward the landing. The current eased near the edge. The water moved with less pull. The sound softened. The poles pressed with more care. Set, press, lift, drip. Each movement smaller, more precise. The barge drifted closer. The wooden landing took shape. Worn planks, low posts, a simple place set into the earth. The bank rose slightly behind it. Grass moved in the light breeze. The rivermen shifted their footing. A small adjustment, then steady again. The poles dipped once more. Set, press, hold. The barge slowed. The motion reduced. The current passed around them. The second pole followed. Set, press, hold. The barge aligned with the landing, parallel, even. The movement eased further, almost still. The sound of water lowered. A steady tone beneath the quiet. Brenna remained steady. Edrin watched the edge. Kaela observed the landing. Thomas rested his gaze on the water. The riverman at the front reached for a rope. It rested coiled at his feet. He lifted it with a quiet motion. The fibers shifted softly. He stepped onto the landing. The wood held firm. He moved a short distance and secured the rope around a post. No strain, no rush. The rope settled. The tension held. The second riverman gave a final press with the pole. Set, press, hold, then lifted it free. The barge came to rest. A soft contact. No jolt. Only a quiet settling. The movement ended. The river continued. The barge remained. The rope held steady. The water moved past. Brenna looked along the landing. Edrin adjusted his stance once. Kaela remained near the edge. Thomas stood as before. No one spoke. The air remained calm. The breeze moved lightly. The scent of water and wood stayed present. The journey had reached its end, not with change, not with weight, only with arrival. Brenna stepped forward. Her movement was quiet, measured. She crossed the barge toward the landing. The plank was set in place, steady, unmoving. She stepped across. The wood held. Her weight settled evenly. Edrin followed. Then Kaela. Then Thomas. Each step the same. Even, unhurried. They moved on to the landing. The barge remained behind them. The river continued beside it. The rivermen stayed where they were, calm, at ease. The rope held. The poles rested. The landing remained quiet. No voices. No movement beyond what was needed. Brenna held the parchment at her side. She did not look at it again. There was no need. The path ahead was simple, a continuation. Edrin looked briefly back toward the river. "Good crossing," he said. The riverman gave a small nod. "It holds." Kaela looked along the path ahead. Clear. Thomas rested his gaze forward. It continues. No one added to it. The river moved. The barge rested. The landing held. The light remained soft, even. The breeze moved once more, then settled. The group stood for a moment longer, then began to walk. Their steps were quiet, even, measured. The path led away from the water, gradually, without change. Behind them, the barge remained tied. The river continued its motion, unbroken. The sound softened with distance. The landing returned to stillness, the same as before, the same as always. The light held steady. The air remained calm, and the journey came to its quiet close.